بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي من علينا بصحة الاعتقاد وطهر قلوبنا من أدران الشرك والوطنية والإلحاد وأنقذنا من دركة الجاهلية والشر والفساد. أحمده تعالى وأشكره وأتوب إليه وأستغفره جل أن الأنداد وتنزه عن الصاحبة والأولاد وتعالى عن مشابهة العباد. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له شهادة من علم معناه وعمل بمقتضى وحقق المراد. وأشهد أن نبينا محمد عبد الله ورسوله إمام الموحدين وختم الأنبياء والمرسلين والهادي إلى سبيل الحق والرشاد وشفيع مشفيع يوم المآد. صلى الله وسلم وبارك عليه وآل آله وصحبه الأمجاد والتابعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلا يوم التناد. أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. First, brothers and sisters, if everybody can see the board, I wanted to know, you can say yes. If you can see the board, just say yes if you can see it. On Facebook, everybody can see the board. On Facebook, if you could say yes. Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum salam. Can you see the board? Can you guys see the board?
What was that?
Can you see the board?
No, but you have to get more closer.
Oh,
I sent her the picture. Is somebody else on?
no. It's too far?
I sent her the picture.
Yes, it's too far.
I'll send you the I sent you the picture and I'll send you the next one.
She sent you the picture.
Since she's the only one on.
You heard that? Layla?
I'm gonna get my headset so I can hear you guys.
Okay. Okay. All right, everybody said. Okay. Alhamdulillah, brothers and sisters, we first and foremost, we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we constantly seek His help and His guidance, and we always put Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first before we put anybody, because Allah is worthy of all praises, and this is unconditional. So, alhamdulillah, we know that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the best and the standard of humanity in terms of using as an example to be able to become better worshippers, or to be better in character, and to better have a much more greater understanding of ourselves. Looking within the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's behavior is like looking in a mirror, and basically the reflection of that mirror is something that you and I should be able to comprehensively reflect the behavior that he displayed, which basically was the Quran and the Sunnah. And so the Quran is something that must be embodied, and what that means is it's more of a behavior that one has to incorporate within his character, within his attitude, the way he thinks, the way he behaves. And we just don't want to get in a position where we dissociate the concept of Islam and the application of Islam. And there are certain things within our internal structure, and I call it a structure because Allah says, and He created us in due proportion, right? لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا إِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَانِ تَقْوِيمٍ. So the inner structure of us is the most important part of us. And when we talk about the soul, right, and the heart, it is the development of our personality, how we behave. It's basically based on how much we trained our inner structure. The way we apply ourselves in our environment will be based on the internal structure, and the outward example of what we do in terms of our internal structure should be exemplified outwardly. And so there are things that what we call the inner apartments, which means taking a deep introspection of ourselves. And there are some things that we constantly, continuously have to work on and develop. Purification is a process that continues, and it is not at any given time that we can relax and not straightening out our inner apartments, our inner selves. But there is a production, as we say on the board, we're talking about the systematic production of desires, right? I call it systematic because it's designed based on a system to create production based on desires. And there's two aspects to it. The external system that basically advertises and subliminally manipulates the internal desires and turns them upside down. So we have desires of aspiration that brings about positive success. Then you have the lower desires that we're going to be talking about, that basically the systematic production of desires is twofold. One that is from within our own selves, if we're not challenging and fighting those lower aspects of ourselves, and two, the external world that basically incites or becomes the stimulus, right? To stimulate those internal desires to fit into a structure, right? So I put the design on the board with the verses. Systematic production of desires, which we call hawa, right? So we have here the advertisement, we have the structuration, which is the structuration, meaning basically how things are structured, right? We have the product, we have the incitement, and down at the base, and I put it at the base because that's where hawa comes from, the base of our lower selves. So it's at the base of the pyramid, the stimuli, right? Hawa. And we have the supply and the demand, nafsi amma, right? The addiction. Now this addiction is basically on a wide world scale. Most of the time when people hear addiction, they think about alcohol, crack, cocaine, heroin, opioids, and all those things. But see, there are many dynamics to addiction. And believe me, when we get into this topic, we'll see that all the substances of addiction, those things are not actually what causes addiction. It's not those things, right? So, I just want to, So, let me just give you a few things that Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, rahimahullah, he mentioned in his book. He says, وَمِن مُفْسِدَاتِ الصَّيِّئَاتِ أَنَّهَا أَأْمَى الْقَلْبِ. He said, one of the damaging effects of the hawa, right, or the evil deeds of the hawa, is that it blinds the heart. أَنَّهَا أَأْمَى الْقَلْبِ إِذَا لَمْ يَأْمُوا يُدَعْفُونَ بَصِيرَاتِهَا. And he says that if they don't blind, if the hawa does not blind the heart, or the desire blinds the heart, then they will weaken its insight, right? إِذَا لَمْ يَأْمُوا يُدَعْفُونَ بَصِيرَاتِهَا. It blinds or it weakens right? Most of the damaging effects of the hawa causes damage to how we think. It causes damage to how our moral comportments are supposed to be, how we behave morally, right? Our intellect also goes into a stage of erotic state of confusion. This is the danger of hawa. It causes many diseases. And it is the focal point of our topic, right? So, if you look here in one of the other statements he mentioned, he said, "Al-athamu tu'athiru ala al-fahm al-qalbi." And then he said, sinful acts of the desires affects the understanding of the heart. So now, two things happen. He didn't say here, he said the understanding of the heart. The heart lacks the understanding. The heart has the ability to have the intellect to be able to decipher. So this hawa, following the hawa, causes the individual to not have good understanding. And also not having good comprehension. Right? And so what also happens is that the hawa, if a person follows it, then his intellect will be hidden from him. And they call it ghaib, absent. That's why they say absent-minded or absent-hearted, because Allah mentions in Quran that there are people who worship, but their bodies are in, but their hearts are absent. And that means they're not in the comprehensional dimension where that what they're reciting, their hearts are not involved. Their bodies are. Their tongues are reciting, but the worship of the heart is not involved. And so when the hawa does damage to every faculty that makes us human, that brings us to the higher level of humanity or the self-actualized personality, right? And he mentioned again, he said, عندما يصاب القلب بالعمى والضعف. And then he said, when the heart becomes blind by the hawa and weak, it is unable to realize the work of guidance, right? The work of guidance, right? And that is to say that the person no longer finds the right way. لا يستطيع أن يدرك أعمال الإرشاد, right? And so he's not able to find his way. وتتلاشى قدرته على إرشاد الناس إلى صراط مستقيم, right? And then the guidance he cannot realize. He's unable to work towards the guidance and its power to lead the people to the right path. And it fades according to the level of the hawa covering up his intellect, right? The level of it. And its weakness of insight, he loses power. So now, let's take a look at this. The reason why many of our comprehension is damaged. A lot of times you can read and you can write and you can do all the proficient things that brings about one part of intellect. But when it comes to the Quran, many of us are misunderstanding the Quran. Many of us have poor comprehension to the insight and the deeper meaning of the Quran. So we mispractice. So look at how hawa does. When you get clouded by the hawa, we start doing our own thing, but we try to put a spin to it in terms of how we try to practice Islam based on our thinking, but not based on the intellectual capacity and the spiritual capacity that the Quran came to uplift our intellect. Not that you can contribute to the Quran with your poor, weak intellect, but the Quran came to uplift your intellect to a higher level of spiritual insight. And that's what we call basira. So when basira is lacking, it is all because it's clouded. There's many dynamics that are going on, and there's a need for constant purification constantly working on our internal structure so that we can be able to see truly what Allah is saying. So the Quran came to guide our thinking. Many of us are thinking on a level that I've been guided to Islam from Christianity or whatever walk of life that you was living before Islam. So you come into the fold of Islam. Now the other deeper aspect of Islam is the spiritual level of being involved with Islamic practice. And that is that you have to allow the Quran to guide your thinking, to guide your hawa, your desires. Your desires cannot be separate from the Quran. Your thinking cannot be separate from the thinking and higher level of the Quran. Your behavior and character cannot be separate from Sunnah, from the behavior and the standard of excellent character of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what we're doing, we're practicing Islam the way we behave in our society, ordinary society. But yet we're saying we're Muslim and we're doing some of the outer things, what we call the outer of ibadat, which is actually conformed into mu'amalat. The social action of the rituals of Islam are being seen on the behavior of the Muslim. But the actual guidance of how one thinks, the way he behaves, the way he does his businesses, his economics, his politics are all separate. And that's where we come into the violation of dissociating, right? Disconnecting. For when one is attached to something else, he's detached from something else, right? When he's attached to something, he's detached from something else. The attachment and detachment. We detach ourselves from lower desires and attach ourselves to the higher level of the spiritual comportment that Allah created, which is the fitra, right? And Islam is the way we practice it and do services to it to bring out the best of us, right? And so this perfection of human revolves on two principles: to distinguish the truth from falsehood. This is what the Quran came. That's why it's called Al-Furqan, right? If the Quran is Al-Furqan, and it is, which means to be able to distinguish, be able to separate, right? To be able to detach one from anything that is in contrary to Islam, right? Anything or any behavior or any thinking has to be detached from that thinking to that which it is associated with and attached to the greater aspect of Quran and the greater behavior of Quran, which is Sunnah, found in the example of Uswatun Hasana. He is the pattern of good character and good conduct, right? Okay, so again, we see this systematic production of desires, right? If you go to this Surah A'raf, ayat 20 and 22. I want someone to read it out loud so we can hear this verse, right? 7:20-22. We're going to deal with the advertisement aspect of how the hawa is being stimulated. Okay? We'll go to the original aspect of advertisement. And when we talk about advertisement, we're talking about false advertisement, right? Where it started. Okay?
But Satan whispered to them to make apparent to them that which was concealed from them of their private parts. He said, your Lord did not forbid you this tree except that you become angels or become of the immortal. And he swore by Allah to them, indeed, I am from among the sincere advisors.
Alhamdulillah. So we see that, right? Right? So he made them fall. Where's the other part? Okay. فَوَسْوَسَ لَهُمَا شَيْطَانٌ لِيُدِي لَهُمَا مَا subhanallah. ما أري عنهما من سوءاتهم وقال ما نهاكما ربكما عن هذا الشجرة إلا أن تكونا ملكين أو تكونا من الخالدين. He said falsely, your Lord does not forbid you this tree. This is an advertisement, right? When we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Adam and Hawa, he said, La taqraba hadhihi shajarati. Do not go near the tree. Allah gave them a command and an order to show you how powerful desires can be even after knowledge has been delivered to us. How many of us do have knowledge of the things that are forbidden, but still become victim of our lower desires and the whisper of the waswasalahum shaitan, right? So that shows that even after the knowledge was given to them, they still followed their desires with a little help, with incitement, right? Incitement, right? False advertisement. When he told them, your Lord didn't forbid you this tree, lest you become angels, immortals. This is false advertisement. The same thing that your society does with the media, that they want to sell you a product, right? The product. And when they want to sell you the product, it's all by all means necessary, through deception. They'll tell you all kinds of things so that you can buy it. And it's all about the money, right? But it is also based on their desires, because they desire wealth, and doing so is based on deception and false advertisement. Or the product won't sell. And the product is not really as equipped as it really is told. The same thing. The product and the advertisement that Shaitan gave them, that thing about the tree being living forever, not being forbidden, was all part of the advertisement that was struck to the human desire. Because Shaitan knew that the human being has a desire that is hasty and it loves pleasure over pain many times. As we know that in our society, we did things that were long-lasting pain for short-term pleasures, but it was the pleasures that we were seeking. So we were pleasure seekers. And that's what the world and the structuration is about. You go to this surah, right? Al-Imran, ayat 14. Go to that surah. Surah 3, ayat 14. Right?
Beautified for people is the love of that which they desire, of women and sons, heaped up sums of gold and silver, fine branded horses and cattle and tilled land. That is the enjoyment of the worldly life, but Allah has with him the best return.
Okay. Again, structuration. The whole thing is structured around hayat dunya. This world's life is what? Zina, beautified, decorated, right? Apparel, right? The world is beautified. All the things heaped up with gold, sons, right? Because sons are the inheritors to continue the wealth of those of their parents. What else? What else?
The next one?
No. It says beautify, heaped up of gold.
Beautify for the people is the love of that which they desire.
Love that they desire. You see? The love that which they desire. Please go to this verse so you can see the structuration of this. Right? Beautify to men is what the love of their desires want. The desires. So, what we're getting at is that none of the things that is the apparel, the dunya, that is not the actual thing that people get addicted to. It's their desires that is under demand. That's why they call it nafsi amr. Nafsi amr means that demands the soul, lower self, to want something. Just like that verse. To love these things, to love, the love of your desires is what causes the door to open to all forms of addiction. Love and everything. That's why people fall in love, as they think, where they can't get out of abusive situations, or they're so extremely in love with a person that they do stuff to themselves and they do stuff to other people. And it is not love, because love does not do that. It's really the desires are contaminated, where that the person's what he desires as love comes into obsession, right? So when a person comes to this level of obsession from the desires, then it becomes possession. So he's possessed by the psychological makeup of what he's, the complex that he's controlled by. Possession means that your faculties are no longer totally in control of you. The love that you had is no longer in control of you. It has been controlled by obsession, compulsive disorder, as they say. You're compulsive now. You're impulsive. You're extreme. You'll do anything and you'll hurt and do damage. And so therefore, that comes from the love of your desires. And once the person has this kind of love, it takes it out of his concept. And so Shakespeare said love is blind. What he meant by it is that, first, I don't look at your physical appearance because beauty is inner, right? The other meaning is that the person's love is blind. What they think they love is actually obsession and being possessed by their desires. And so they make these statements, love is blind. No, love in this originality, in the true context, is all good. The word muhabba is love. And when you love, you always benefit. You don't digress. But the desires mixed up, which we call infatuation. They say, Ya Fatana, oh beautiful one who hath put a spell on my heart, put a spell on my mind, because I loved from the inner desires, which turned, or it's like mixing, right? And it causes confusion, right? So that is the structuration of the production of how they advertise to our lower desires. Everything that people wanted came from their desires. The new car, oh, I got to get that. The new style of clothes, I got to get those, right? Everything, the advertisement, the commercials, the billboards, right? The telemarketers, all of them are striking at your lower desires because they found a way to know what Shaitan did to us. So they use it as what we call, there's a book called Marketing Evil. I did put it up on the Facebook. Marketing evil. How they market evil. How they market the dunya, the worldly things that makes your desire becomes the stimuli. The stimuli, right? That becomes the stimulating thing. The advertisement is the stimuli, right? The structuration is the stimulus, right? If you go to this one, 4 and 119, incitement, right? Incitement. Look at what Shaitan says now. Now understand that he also is the stimulant, but he only gets it from inside of you. He said, I shall incite with them inside themselves. So it all comes back to us. Even with all the false advertisement, even with all the structuration, the product and all that, that is not on demand. That is just the supply. But the real supply and demand is your desires. Cut off your desires, you cut off the demand.
And I will mislead them, and I will arouse in them sinful desires.
Okay, stop. He said, I will mislead them, and I will arouse or incite in them evil desires. Evil desires. The desires that we're talking about. Right? Okay.
And I will command them so they will slit the ears of cattle. And I will command them so they will change the creation of Allah.
Right. Change the creation. Really distort the creation. Because once Allah created us, we are who we are. But He's distorting the fair nature. So now He makes a man want to be a woman and make changes. Make a woman want to be a man and make changes. He said, I will incite in them false desires. I will arouse. He becomes the stimuli. But in them, it's already you that you have been exploited just by Shaitan. But actually, if you didn't control your desires, or if you control your desires, then it doesn't matter about the advertisement. It doesn't matter about the product. It doesn't matter about the structuration of the beautiful things that he makes pleasing in this world. It wouldn't matter about the excitement. If I can control my desire, I cut off the supply and the demand. Right? And that's why Allah is saying that the greater jihad on nafs, the greater struggle is controlling our nafs, our lower selves. Right?
And whoever takes Shaitan as an ally instead of Allah has certainly sustained a clear loss.
Okay. So once we follow our desires, then Shaitan, we take him as a friend. Because that's what he wanted us to do. Right? So the structuration of social production. Everybody know what social production is. The things that they produce in society. All the things that we just talked about. It is equivalent to the constructuation. What is the construct? The way they construct things. Look how they set up the news. Look how they set up the stores, the supermarkets. They put everything, they construct everything that's terrible, everything that's good in eye view, right? So when the eye see it, the desires respond, the stimulant, right? And they structure everything, they construct it, right? They put it in every part and sector of the society that they control. Nothing separated. And that's what we think. We think that living in this world, we can enter it on a normal basis of the society's model. You think that it's okay because you don't see the danger. That's why a Muslim has to have furqan, basira, having insight to be able to see beyond the surface of things. But because of our desires, it blinds our insight. It blinds our intellect. It suspends our intellect at the moment, right? So the structuration of social production is equivalent to the constructuation and structuration of desire. It's designed for your desires. That's what this means. It's set up for your desires to want it that way. So they become the organized crime industry because they organize it, they socially engineer it. Everything to the bottom of all what you see on TV, even in the movies, right? You have no clue of what they're doing. And this is what brings about the psychosis, all through what they advertise. They have a design that structures and fits, as Shaitan said. Shaitan uses every tailored weakness. Every weakness that you have, he tailors it. It fits you. Because he knows it, right? So he designs it for you. Whatever he needs to deceive you by, he will design it and tailor it so that it can fit perfectly, right? They do the same thing, right? It's all structured towards your desire. The social production is desiring the production. The social production that they created, why? Because they made it where that it becomes a stimuli for you. A stimulus. It strikes you. You want it. You see it. You go after it. You do it. Even to the fact of our own selves. We follow our desires. Most of our disobedience comes from because we don't want to do something that is contrary to what we desire. Look how many people don't want to obey Allah in particular aspects of their deen. You ask them, why? I don't feel like doing it. I don't want to put it on right now. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. All because you desire to do something contrary. It's all based on your desires. Right? That's why Allah says, and do not follow those who follow their desires. Right? Because desires are blind passion. You can't see. Right? You can't understand if you're passionately acting and reflecting off your impulses. Right? So the structuration of desire, the organized production, and the presentation of the objects, the conditions, and the situations which invoke your desire, the stimulant, right? So we go to the product. 20 Surah Taha, 120.
And Shaitan whispered to him, he said, O Adam, I shall direct you to the tree of eternity and possession that will not deteriorate.
Okay. You see that? Oh, Adam. Ya Adamu. Ya Adamu. He called him with a beautiful call. Ya Adamu. He showed or made him believe that he was affectionate, that he was someone of truth. Just like telemarketers. How you doing, Mr. Tariq? How's everything going? You just met the person. And he's speaking as if you are familiar with him for years. You see how they catch you out there with that, Ya Adamu, shall I show you a tree that is khuddi, which means khalid, forever, right? So that's what everybody wants anyway. Their desire is to desire to be on top, to be number one, to have the best things in life, which they believe it is, material objects, right? Productions, right? All of that. And so that is the product, right? And we said the incitement. Now let's go to Surah 28 and 50. Go to 28 and 50.
But if they do not respond to you, then know that they will only follow their own desires, and who is more astray than the one who follows his desires without guidance from Allah. Indeed, Allah does not guide the wrongdoing people.
Okay, you see that? When you follow your Lord's desires, how could you be guided? It's almost having your eyes closed and you walking and think that you won't bump into something. The desires are the key. That's what's on demand. That is the supply. And if we cut that by what? As the Prophet ﷺ said, fight your Lord's desires with the remembrance of Allah. Right? So look at the definition of al-hawa to show you the deep part of this definition. Linguistically, al-hawa is the inclination of the self to a thing, anything, right? Your desires are clinged to a person so deep that you don't care what he does to you. That's how deep blind passion can be, right? To incline to the self to a particular thing, whatever that thing and object is. You cling on to it, right? Without any thinking, without using intellect, without contemplating, right? So it means Yahweh, it means to fall down from a high place or to trip. Every time you follow your desires, you trip. It falls down from a high place. What place? The status of righteousness, the self-actualized self. You fall down from a high place. What is the high place for us? The integrity, the honor, the servant who serves Allah versus serving his desires. He falls from a high place, right? So it throws a person down from his moral comportment. Your morals get out the window. Your morals are gone. Your integrity is gone when you follow your desires, right? It also means his integrity, his honor, muru'ah. The muru'ah is the integrity, the moral standard of the person. So now you see in society, look how many people have been stripped. What did Allah say? And do not let shaitan strip you as he stripped your parents and got them out of the high status of paradise. Look, to fall down from a high place. They were in the highest place. Jannah. They were in the highest place. But because they followed their desires by the incitement of shaitan, they fell down. They tripped. And they lost their muru'ah, their moral comportment, the trees, right? The trees, they had to cover themselves with the leaves, right? They had to cover themselves with the leaves to cover up their shame because it was exposed. They fell from a high place. That high place was Jannah, the high place of moral comportment, the standard of morals that a person, the best of you, are those who are best in morals, best in character. Khuluq, right? That's how the hawa throws the person from the high status of honor, the high status of integrity, right? So, it demands ready-made pleasure. The hawa demands ready-made pleasure without thinking about the outcome. Now you think about yourself. Think about how we disobey Allah just for our pleasure-seeking selves. Just because we want to have a good time. We want to continue to listen to the music. We still want to continue to have the birthday parties. We still want to have all the things that society advertised to us, all because of your desires. Right? It has nothing to do with whether it's the truth, whether it's haram or halal. You want desirable, pleasure-seeking pleasure. That's what it means. It demands ready-made pleasure. We want to have fun now. We want our mansions and things here, right? We want all the material things, the objects of our desires. That's what they call it. The object of my desire. So the object becomes an ilah, right? And do you not see those who take their hawa as an ilah, right? So ubudiyat is about worship, the object of worship. So Allah is the object of worship. So the person is abd. He's abd because he takes Allah as the object of worship and he adores worshiping Allah, right? So the person also, when he takes his desires as God, right, he makes his desires the objective of pleasure, and then if he spends his time doing so, he becomes an abd to his desires. He worships the money. He worships the lifestyle, right? He worships the women. They spend their time doing something, and those things that what they're doing becomes the object of their desires. So that is the part where the person commits shirk, right? Because he's taken an object for worship other than Allah, right? So it incites or demands immediate obtainment. And this other part here on the board, on the bottom, okay? It incites or demands immediate obtainment of lust, vanity, even though it is sooner or later the cause of greater suffering. Right? So the person, ready-made pleasure. Right? That's why desires are dangerous. Because it teaches impatience. It teaches hastiness. We want a house, so we will deal in riba just to have that big house. We will deal in riba and don't even worry about the consequences. That's what ready-made pleasure does, right? At the expense of the destruction or the cause of greater suffering, right? So hawa blinds the heart from seeing the end and the beginning, right? It blinds the heart from seeing the end and in the beginning, meaning you don't see the consequences before it happens. You go through the trial and tribulation, and then you see the consequences when it's too late. Because hawa blinds your faculty, right? Then, man's muru'ah, his integrity, his morals, is suspended, right? Morals, his integrity, and the intellect is covered up as if he or she is drunk, incapacitated, right? It fogs your thinking. When you follow your desire, you're not thinking right. And then it causes confusion. You make wrong decisions. You don't have the ability to distinguish the unlawful, even though you know it's unlawful. Distinguishing here, it means actually staying away from that. And that's how you distinguish. Not because you know right from wrong. It's when you abstain from the wrong, that's when you are able to distinguish. Al-Furqan means to separate. So your actions will be separated from the actions that are condemned. Okay? So a lot of us, we say, oh, I know right from wrong, and still do wrong. So you have not had the ability to have Al-Furqan until you are able to stay away from what separates from righteousness. Right? From falsehood. Right? So, the self, as they say, سَتَقْتِعُ ذَاتَ الرَّابِهَةِ. The self will obey the winner. Huh? The self will obey the winner. Either the hawa gets you or your higher level gets you. You obey what is right, right? Or if the desires are the ones that's more within your reach and you're victimized by it, then that's who wins, right? That's what they mean. The self will obey the winner. Whoever wins, either you follow the hawa or you follow your higher moral comportment, right? Then al-hawa is takhleed. And takhleed means disorder and confusion of the intellect. And this is where many people get their diseases. They have disorder in their intellect because the intellect is supposed to steer you to do the higher level things to rise to the level that Allah says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا إِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَانِ تَقْوِيمٍ. If Allah created us in the best of stature, then that means we work towards that high level of stature, right? If Allah tells us that He created us to be self-actualized, we work towards that. But takhleed, disorder and confusion of the intellect, when one rides his hawa, it is like jamu. And jamu is like a horse, right? That overcomes its rider. Jamu, right? Jamu is like a person who rides a horse. And he's riding the horse, and the horse throws him over, throws him down, right? Overcomes him. So they call the hawa the jamu, because when you ride your desires, it throws you down, because that's the meaning of al-hawa, to throw you down from a high place. So shaitan, he knows this. So what he does, he advertises to our lower desires, because he knows that when a person is not in control of his lower desires, he becomes the victim of all circumstances, right? And so he throws him down and then runs away, and then the horse is ungoverned. So the person's hawa that throws you down and you follow it, then you and yourself is not governed by righteousness and uprightness, honor and dignity and integrity. That's what makes us who we are. Integrity, honesty, justice, purity. These are all the perfected characters that was all by due proportion that Allah created, that we continue to purify, because they get tainted here and there. It's a process of continuation. The continuity of constantly working on ourselves is a mandatory obligation. Right? So here, so that he is ungoverned by him. All diseases, the spiritual ones, the mental ones, and the physical ones come from this disease called al-hawa. It eventually leads to addiction, to worldly pleasures of all sorts. It causes grief, anxiety, fear, and mental challenges. So now we understand why people have anxiety, right? When they lose some property or some money, they get in a frenzy. They go into grief, right? Because they can't control their desires of having, and they can't do without. They can't stay without. They need, they think they need what they want, right? And it's a want that they just want, right? So what happens here is that the organized structure towards desires in ways which supports the system. See? It is all designed by shaitan in terms of the worldly beautification. To design in ways that supports the system. His whisper and his suggestion is over the world. In every institution. He's not left out of the picture of anything that you do. You got to always remember that. So it supports the system, and it's related to social order, which we should call social disorder, right? Desires, the tastes, and needs are so provoked and organized by manufactured products, marketing strategies to accomplish satisfaction. Even they are addicted. The ones who are systematically producing the stimulus to your desires also follow their desires, And they want ready-made pleasure and satisfaction at the expense of their destruction. Because why? Because they themselves can't control their desires. Right? So all of that, the seeking pleasure, right? All the money in the world still doesn't satisfy the hawa, because the hawa has no accountability except for the one who puts it in check, right? Desires is how the individual relates and determined by a matrix of intrinsically mechanated desires. Why we call it intrinsic. It's inside. It's inside the lower part. It's all that what Shaitan said. I shall incite within them the desire. It's already in you to have these things. The hastiness, right? The disobedience is in there, but it has to be controlled. So he said, I have to incite it, right? I have to ignite it, right? So desires is how the individual relates and determined by a matrix of intrinsically mechanated. It's a mechanism. It's to his madness, right? Desires, needs, and wants, right? That is the social field in which the individual, he becomes immersed. He becomes invested with desire, not the outer things of the products and structuration. It is inside. That's why I put it in the pyramid. Nifsi amr is inside. Right? The mechanated desire, needs, and wants. That is the social field in which the individual is immersed. You invest in your lower desires. Right? Those persons, the objects and situations which populate his social sphere of his activity are defined by his obsessive desires. You can't get enough of it. It's all there. You want it. Right? And all the songs are designed for you to be ignited to follow your desires. And most of these songs, many of the people, millions, have committed zina based on the music. It incites sexual promiscuity. All the songs that we sung and the songs that people still singing is all created intrinsically a machination of creating a spark in your hawa. You see? Right? And the profound is profound statement, but not a profound concept. My mind is telling me no, but my body is telling me yeah. What does that mean? It means that there's a conflict. My intellect is confused. Right? And at the end, which one wins is the winner. So my mind is telling me no, but my body, meaning his flesh, meaning his nafs, meaning his hawa, is saying yeah, yeah, yeah. And the mind is saying no, no, no. But guess what? The desires won and took over his mind, because the mind is something that we're supposed to have intellect, and intellect steers us to do the right thing. But because he allowed the desires to overcome his mind, it destroyed and suspended his intellect, and so now he commits the act. You see? And so all those songs are created for your desire. And guess what he said? Fire and desire. What fire? Because fire ignites. And fire burns out of control. Right? It means passion is wild. Your nature has gone wild. It's not controlled. No lijam, like a muffle that you put on a barking dog. Right? Because he barks all the time. So you got to put that muffle on his mouth so you can train him from snapping. So your desires have to be muzzled. It has to be controlled. Right? Fire and desire. Why? Because fire and desire, the fire ignites evil passion, incites in us. Right? All of this manufactured mechanism is the field that people are immersed and investing in. Right? So that establishment, manipulation of his addictive desires and behaviors maintain the establishment's organizational infrastructure. The addict's desire is his addiction to his desires to satisfy his artificial hunger and his appetite. That's why they call it the lower appetite, the animalistic appetite, right? So he turned upside down. That's why they call it takallu. His heart means it changes, it fluctuates, it turns inside out. Just like they had that song way back in the days. Upside down, boy, you turn me inside out and round and round. What that means is the heart was in confusion, in disorder, right? And that's what takallub means. It means to change inside and out. The upper part becomes the bottom part. And it makes the person go round and round. Confusion, right? And that is because her hawa was attached with obsessive compulsion, right? So we see, so now the desire is fixated. That's what happened to her in the song. And many people were victims of it, right? The desire was fixated for the fix, and the hunger is animalistic now. Now you're going to respond off of your animalistic desire. Because animals live based on instinct. And Allah says they're like cattle. No, they're worse than cattle. Right? Those who follow their desires. Right? So, as he finds for an illusory feeling. Why is it called an illusory feeling? Because the illusion of this world's life is nothing but gharura, deception, right? Deception. It's an illusory life. It's artificial. It was set up. It was structured by shaitan, right? He made the world beautified in order to incite you towards your animalistic feeling and hunger. So if you cut the supply and the demand of desires, you cut off the supply of the addiction of this world. And this is the concept of this, brothers and sisters, right? So now, we said all diseases, spiritual and mental, physical, come from this disease, al-hawa. So that is the danger of hawa. Anybody have a question? A statement? Wa alaikum salam. Any questions and statements?
Assalamualaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
So when I first saw the board and I saw the word hawa, I thought you were meaning air, the atmosphere air.
Oh, so because hawa also means hot air. And so what happens is hawa, that's why, see, the Arabic language is structured. Hawa means hot air, meaning that it's the lower passion that breathes that fire that we're talking about, right?
Right.
So that's where it comes from, right? And it is the inclination to the self, to the thing. It means to fall from a high place. So what is the high place of the human being? First, start with Adam and Hawa. They were in the highest place. It also means to fall from a mountain, right? So the mountain represents height, somewhere in the high level of your self-actualization of you. Allah created us in the highest stature. He created us to be the vicegerents of earth. Now, what happens? ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. And then they become the lowest of low because they follow their hawa. Right? Anybody else have a question? Was that your question or statement?
That was my question. And then another question was when you were talking about al-Furqan.
Yes, Furqan.
So go ahead and explain that one again to be able to establish.
Right.
What?
Faraka. So the word al-Furqan comes from faraka, something that divides, something that separates, right? So the Quran is a book that separates the truth from falsehood, unrighteousness from righteousness, right? So Furqan is that the person knows how to divide or separate what is not right and what is right. But everybody seems to lack this ability. But you have to put a barrier between what? My hawa and my higher level of righteousness. He who does not put a barrier between his hawa, he will become overcome by it. So Furqan means to be able to distinguish. Right? Just like the Battle of Badr was called Al-Furqan. Why? Because it was a fight between the kuffar and the Muslims. Right? Distinguishing between the dawn, iftar, right? To distinguish between fast breaking, right? Distinguish from darkness and light. It can be used for all things, but know that it's the opposite of what it is. So to know something in out of it is to know the opposite that makes the beauty and makes things clear from knowing the opposite of something. So that's what the Furqan is. And so Muslims seem to today lack this ability of distinguishing today. For instance, on our political, what we call arena, the political arena, the medical arena, we're supposed to be able to distinguish a medicine from poison, a cure from a poison. We're supposed to distinguish that. And unfortunately we don't. The reason why we have halal and haram is because it's al-Furqan. To be able to distinguish between these two. And then you treat the halal like the halal, and you treat the haram like the haram. In between is mutashabihat. Those doubtful, unclear things that resemble something, but the weak-minded person, the weak intellect, cannot distinguish between these two because they resemble the same to him. So that's why he's confused. It looks like, but he can't really tell, but he's supposed to. Because that's what the Quran came to do. It gives us insight, basira, to be able to see beyond the surface of things. We're losing in this area. We're losing. The Muslims don't know how to distinguish a medicine from poison. They don't know how to distinguish these things. Politics, they don't know how to distinguish politics and corrupt politics. They don't. That's why they're victims. And the scholars say, he says, how could I be on guard from that which I don't know what to be on guard from? Yattaqi. You can't protect yourself if you don't know what you're protecting yourself from. Right? So it's very important we understand. You got that word?
Yes, I got that word, Shukran.
There's another word that people look up. Menticide. And Shaitan was the first to do that. Menticide means the systematic effort to undermine and destroy a person's values and his beliefs by suggestions, radical suggestions, right? Brainwashing, right? Undermining the person's conscience. So they rape the person's mind in poetry. It means that they stripped his intelligence. When they say they raped his mind, that means they stripped his intelligence. Just like Allah warned us, do not let Shaitan rape, do not let Satan rape you out of your righteousness. Or strip you out of your righteousness. And people are being stripped of their righteousness. Stripped of their integrity. Stripped of their honesty. Stripped of their dignity. Right? All of that. The rape of the mind. And the soul. So, Najma Medina, Muhammad, Salamu Alaikum. When one can't distinguish between the Furqan, is that a symptom of being narcissistic? Not really, but the narcissist is a person who does not know how. You kind of, yes, I see where you're going at. The person, not necessarily him being a narcissist, because we got people who are just regular, who are not narcissists, and they can't distinguish. But a narcissistic personality person, yes, can't distinguish between his narcissistic behavior and his narcissistic attitude from the attitude that he's supposed to possess. Yes, and I see where you're going with that. Just a little discussion on it. Alhamdulillah. Yes, the narcissistic personality of the person, he does not have furqan. He doesn't. He continues the behavior believing that everything is self-centered around him. And that's far from the truth. And they call it displacement dissociation syndrome, right? When the person constantly, every characteristic that he believes other people have, he himself possesses it. Okay. Anybody else with the question? And we will get into the narcissistic personality and how Shaitan was the first to have this kind of description. Shaitan and narcissism. We will deal with that in the next class. Okay. Anybody else? What did you say, Shiggy?
You said Hawa is the disease?
Yeah. Al-Hawa is the disease, is the opening to all the diseases.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Al-Hawa, the desire. Following one's desires cause mental issues, disorders, physical as well. And they play out and their dynamics by many other things, because being that it's a spiritual disease more, but it is manifested in their behavior and manifested in their thinking, the things that you say. So you'll see it. And anything that's at